Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2024 release, Lowlifes. It's a Tubi exclusive, which is the first time I'm reviewing one of those, but not a film I was aware of, but this was a recommendation from Felix from the Mod Squad Network. It's a YouTube channel. You can just look for the Mod Squad on there, which I have done an interview with them recently. And yeah, this review is dedicated to Felix because he told me about this film and he was like, pretty interesting, check it out. So I did, and I enjoyed my time with it. It's not like a super high rated film for me, but it was definitely worth the watch. So I would say check it out. Also, I'm going to have some spoilery thematic stuff that I'm going to talk about at the very end of the review, but I will let you know before that happens so I can keep this no spoiler up until that point. So if people want to drop off because you haven't seen it yet, that's cool. All right, so Lowlifes, directed by Tesh Guttikonda, as well as Mitch Oliver, and written by Al Kaplan. Now, Al Kaplan has written scripts for Zombievers, which I have seen and really enjoyed, The Drone, which I have not seen, don't know anything about, and Critters: A New Binge, which was a Shudder original, I believe, and it was literally, I mean, it was basically a Critters movie that was cut into episodes, and that was fun. I enjoyed that one as well. This is a Canadian film, and again, it's a Tubi exclusive, so everyone can access Tubi, so everyone can watch this film. Quick synopsis. It is about a family from the city who go out into the rural wilds of, I forget where, but somewhere in California, I believe, because they said they were from LA. And they run into two brothers who are rural folk, and they are stereotypically rural folk, and things feel very off. And in the very beginning, there is a quick scene of someone getting murdered, so you know that it's a horror movie. There's going to be some blood spilling, stuff like that. So it sets the stage very well that in these woods, something terrible happened. So people are kind of in a bad situation. So it really establishes itself very early of having kind of like a Hills Have Eyes type feel to it, or Wrong Turn, or a little bit Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it is its own film. I'm just saying a feel like that. I'm not saying that's what it is or it's closely compared to. It's its own film. So just check it out, but know that you'll have that kind of air. It'll have that air to it. The beginning will definitely get the attention of slasher fans. Yes, that's fun. Although it's not really a slasher. That's what got me at first. I'm like, oh, are we getting a slasher here? No, not really getting a slasher, but you know, it'll get the attention of slasher fans. The soundtrack in the beginning, pretty excellent. Then as it goes on, they kind of get away from the fun music that they were using in the beginning. I would have actually liked if they would have stuck with those types of songs all the way throughout the film. Although I understand, rights wise, maybe they would have had to pay more in order to use those. So the score is fine, though. It's not overused. The composition of it is solid. So that's all good. The dialogue does flow really well, and most of the actors sell it. The guy who plays the son in the family from the city is probably the weakest link. Well, is definitely the weakest link as far as acting goes with the film, but he's not terrible. Everyone else does just a much better job, in my opinion, and so for that reason, he kind of stands out as being the weak link, unfortunately. But everyone else, I think, did a really good job, and like I said, they really helped make that dialogue even better, even though it was already pretty well written. Now, something about the characters themselves, they're kind of interesting characters, but I think you can't do it with all of them because then the film would end up being too long. And this was an hour and a half film, which feels right for what this story was, even though there are some kind of slight pacing issues with it. But it would have been good if, at least for a few characters, they would have kind of given them a little more backstory, kind of fleshed them out a little bit more. I understand why for some of them they didn't want to do that, because they intentionally want you to kind of go in not knowing too much, because they want it, when you find certain things out about certain characters, they want it to have more impact. But I think that once that happens, you can kind of give a little more context. You can have them grow a little bit, develop a little bit more, so you get to know them. The problem is they all feel very kind of like surface level for the most part, except a few of them, you get a little bit deeper, but not quite deep enough. I think endearing some of these characters to the audience a little bit more really would have helped with the impact of the film. And it also just kind of felt like, yeah, they just needed to go deeper on some of these people, make them a little more interesting, a little more rich character-wise. They deal with the cell phone issue in a kind of funny way that I think actually worked pretty well, because here we go. You know, people going to be in trouble out in the woods. What are you going to do about cell phones? Because you have to address that nowadays. I remember when films were coming out, horror films were coming out, and they weren't addressing that early on, and that became like the big thing that a lot of audience members would talk about, and they'll be like, they have cell phones, they can just use them. So eventually filmmakers caught on, and they're like, okay, we need to cross this off the list at some point. So they take care of it pretty early, and like I said, I think they do it in a kind of funny way, but it definitely works at the same time. So kudos to them for doing it in a more fun way than just being like, someone comes in and like cuts the lines or some garbage like that. It has a slight comedic element. Excuse me. My apologies. It has a slight comedic element to it, which I think actually works pretty well. They don't go too hard on the comedy. I actually think they could have gone a little bit harder on the comedy aspect and have it been more fun. At times when the comedy's happening, it's kind of like a dark comedy aspect, which I'm all for. I love dark comedies. I think they're messed up and fun, so I'm all for that one. There is some pretty good gore here and there. It's not super consistent. Some of the gory scenes are, you know, just a little bit of gore, and some way more interesting and more, I wouldn't say over the top, but just there's more satisfying gore to it. So especially for being a Tubi exclusive, I would have thought that they would have had less in there, because from what I've been reading online, they have been asking some filmmakers and some releasing companies to cut some material, since they're kind of a free to stream service, and they're also trying to pull in more advertisers. So not great, but that's the reality of the situation. Pretty good ending, I thought, for the most part, but it does get drawn out too much, unfortunately. This is kind of an issue I've been seeing come up more and more, especially with lower budget horror films, is they have a good story, they have good momentum, and then they get to the end, and it's kind of like they know what they want to do at the end, but for some reason they feel like they need it to be stretched out. Maybe it's because they need to hit that hour and a half mark. Maybe it's because they just feel like, let's let people kind of languish in what's going on right now. I don't know the reasoning for it, but it is something that's becoming more and more of a problem. Just give us the ending, make it satisfying, and end it. We don't need to stay with that. Like, once you've kind of given people the payoff and let them know what the point of this is, there's no point in just kind of going it over and over and over with it. So that was one of my big issues. And yeah, again, characters could have been and should have been fleshed out a little bit more. So I'm going to give you my review. Obviously, I did like it overall. It was pretty solid. Overall, out of 5 stars, I'm going to give it 3 stars. Thought about going 3.5. I was almost there, so I was pretty in between, but it just doesn't feel like it makes that move to the 3.5 at this point. So 3 stars for me. Still recommend it. Still recommend checking it out if this sounds like something that's interesting for you. So subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'd appreciate that. Hit the thumbs up on this video and any video I've ever done. If you want to help me with that algorithm, hit the notification bell button if you want to know when I'm putting up new videos. Went through that fast. Okay, so now I'm going to get to some of the thematic stuff, which I promised I would let everyone know about. So you can turn it off if you don't want to know that stuff because you haven't seen it, but also you can comment if you have seen about this film, and we can talk spoilers. So let's talk about these themes. This film is ultimately about appearances, stereotyping, and not taking things at face value. I think that was a great point of the film. I think it's something that's very salient right now, especially with a lot of things going on in society and in the world in general. So yeah, appearances, stereotyping, just not taking things for face value, understanding more before judging. This is also about the marginalization of rural people because of how they speak and live. And this hasn't been an ongoing thing throughout everything. I mean, one of the big things you end up seeing in a lot of folk horror films is this kind of people who are rural, who are feeling marginalized by urban society, are clinging more to the folk, the old like folk religions and stuff like that, like more shamanic or druidic stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, it's been an ongoing thing, and I think it was interesting the way they decided to do it in this film, and I think again it's good because it's kind of always an important topic. So yeah, and that goes along with the whole like stereotyping and the appearances stuff I was already talking about. So those are my feelings on the film. Like I said, you can put some comments down here, especially if you feel differently about it. Would love to hear from you, everyone, about that. But anyway, thank you everyone for taking your time to watch this. I greatly appreciate it. And until next time, keep it brutal.